Self-portraiture for me was the most convenient way for me to actually start shooting. Otherwise, I would have never done it. And so how it all started was that I wanted to tell stories through film, but I realized that I don't have money. I was a young copywriter working for a small agency, and I was like, how do I make these films with no money? How do I ball up without a budget? And it just sort of hit me while I was in hospital one time that I have very limited time on this earth. Regardless of what age I am, I have limited time on this earth. If I want to tell these stories, I have to figure a solution around this problem. I don't have money, I want to tell films. Is it possible for me to tell an entire story in a single frame? So the best way I can tell stories is by using myself as a subject, because I'm the subject I know best. So my body, in a way, becomes everybody else's sort of like entry into the story.
Welcome to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast. I'm your host, Kojo Baffoe. In this podcast, I speak to Africans from across a multitude of sectors, including business, art, culture, media, design, technology, advertising, and everything in between, delving into their journeys and reflecting on the lessons they have learned along the way. It's about gaining insight into why and how they do what they do. These conversations offer a treasure trove of takeaways on a wide range of topics, including craft, relationships, wellness, parenting, entrepreneurship, and much more. Cool. So my guest today is Tsoku Maela. He's been defined as many things. So he's been called a conceptual photographer, a visual artist. I was looking on his website and it was listed as an interdisciplinary autoethnographer. So what's an autoethnographer?
So autoethnography is the mechanism of using personal experiences to reflect on the universal. So the reason I say I'm an autoethnographer in what I do is that I actually try to tell stories that come from my lived experiences without necessarily not knowing how it's going to connect with people generally. So if you look at my work in mental health, for example, it's primarily my experience. And by putting it out there, I find that it connects with many different people from different cultural perspectives. And I drew that definition from my learning of anthropology as well, and medical anthropology, in that anthropologists use something called ethnography to study cultures and how people use how those cultural influences and understandings sort of impact the way they connect with the world.
So the thing I found interesting, and the first time you and I had a conversation some many moons ago, was not long after your abstract pieces. So you'd done that series of work, which focused, which was self-portraiture, and so I've always been fascinated by kind of self-portraiture because it feels like an extension of the selfie, and I've personally always been kind of uncomfortable with the selfie, right?
Right.
So how did you come to kind of that piece of work, using yourself as the subject for communicating what you wanted to communicate?
Yeah, sure. I mean, firstly, self-portraiture is not even an extension of the selfie. It is the selfie, right? It is literally the selfie. We made selfies, like we made selfies cool, guys. We're the ones that they should give us credit. We made selfies. Shout out to Frida Kahlo. Shout out to Samuel Fosso. Shout out to many other practitioners before us that were doing this kind of thing in paintings and photography. And I think self-portraiture for me was, how do I explain this? I think for me to explain how I got into self-portraiture, I sort of have to, no pun intended, I have to take a few steps backwards into how I actually kind of like got into picking up the camera to shoot, because I think it was the most convenient way for me to actually start shooting. Otherwise, I would have never done it. And so how it all started was that I wanted to sort of tell stories through film, but I realized that I don't have money to hire people, to hire crews, to hire actors. I would have loved to at that time. I was a young copywriter working for a small agency, and I was like, how do I make these films with no money? How do I ball up without a budget? And it just sort of hit me while I was in hospital one time, and maybe we can get into to this at some point, that I have very limited time on this earth. Regardless of what age I am, I have limited time on this earth. So if I wanted to do, if I want to tell these stories, I have to figure a solution around this problem. I don't have money. I want to tell films. Is it possible for me to tell an entire story in a single frame? That's the challenge I gave myself. Can I use my creative abilities to tell an entire narrative in a single frame? Because a second in film is 24 frames, right? Can I make one of those frames give you the whole story? So that's one problem solved. Like I can do that. I can try to do that. Can I hire people? No. Who do I have? I only have me. I only have me. I have a small bedroom that I stay in. So the best way I can tell stories is by using myself as a subject, because I'm the subject I know best. I live with myself all day. I understand the way my body moves. I understand the nuances of my moods. And I also have the luxury of time. I don't have to rush through it. I can make mistakes. I can also manipulate the scenes with myself in it without worrying that I'm misrepresenting somebody else in the way that I'm editing these images, because photography is also a power dynamic between the photographer and the sitter. So there's also that thing. So it really solved so many problems for me on a social level, for me to be able to just get the work going, that I can use myself as a subject. And yeah, so it just picked up from there. I realized that I could just use myself as a vehicle. And the cool thing about it is that I could also use myself and disguise myself in a way that I don't become like the central figure in this thing. I'm a vehicle into the stories. So my body in a way becomes everybody else's sort of like entry into the story.
How does a young man from Limpopo end up in Cape Town studying film?
Oh wow, we're starting at film. The young man from Limpopo actually ended up in Cape Town studying biochemistry first.
Wow.
And then he went into film. So I wish the story was as simple as me leaving home, going to study film. That would have been a difficult thing to convince my parents to go into. Like, hey, mom, dad,
Yeah,
I did well in metric. I want to go to Cape Town to study film. They would have been like, no, stay home. So I initially went to Cape Town to study a double major in molecular biology and chemistry, which was biochemistry as a discipline. And yeah, so I did my first 3 years there, and in my third year, that's kind of like where I kind of started experiencing all these issues with mental health issues, and this is something I've come to learn over time wasn't unique to me in that faculty or even at that institution. I was at UCT. So that's when I really started having difficulties with my mental health issues, so much that like almost towards the end of the year I couldn't finish writing my exams and eventually left, just like not too far away from the end, which was at the time disappointing, because you've literally worked your whole life to this moment where you know that you want to be a molecular biologist and a biochemist. You know what your goals are in trying to help other people in medicine, yet here you are so close yet so far, and you don't understand why you're unable to perform at the level that you know you can perform, because it's all psychological. It's all very new to me as a young black man. We don't know what depression is. We don't understand what's going on. I just know that I'm not doing well. So I leave UCT, and I go stay with my sister for a little bit in Johannesburg. And yeah, so I'm not really understanding what's happening to me during that time. I'm seeing psychologists. I'm being told that I have this, I have that. I don't know what that means. No one's putting an injection into my body, doing tests, giving me tangible proof that you have a problem. They're just talking to me and then telling me, hey, you have manic depression. Hey, you have this. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Somebody just take me home. But it got to a point where I was at home for a few months towards the end of the year, maybe early into the January, where my family and my parents are asking me, what are you going to do? You can't just stay home, right? You need to do something with your life. And they said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go back and finish my degree. And they're like, it's not possible. After what just happened, I don't think it's possible that you can go back there. And they said, what's the other thing you would rather do with your life? I said, well, if I'm not gonna be a biochemist, I'm gonna write. That's the other thing I can do. I write. I'm a writer. So if I can do that, I'd be happy to do so. So now they know that I want to write. My parents won't fund anything that's not a degree. I'm not doing diplomas. They want a degree. So it's tough. Now we're looking for institutions where I can do writing as a degree. It's late in late in the application cycle because I decided very late. And my sister stumbles upon a film school when she searches for writing as a degree. So screenwriting comes up as an option, which was a crazy coincidence because a couple of months before I left GCT, I was actually learning how to write scripts, but I didn't really know how to apply that. Am I gonna become a script writer? No, I just know how to write the format of a script, TV script and a film script. So when she found that, I was like, it's not exactly what I had in mind, but it's the only thing we have as an option to write as a degree. So I guess we'll go talk to them and see if they'll take me. So we get to the school. We ask them if they'll be open to taking a late application. They look at my UCT transcripts. They're like, okay, I mean, it's a huge jump. I mean, between these faculties, you're coming from the BSc, you're coming to a BA. Are you sure this is what you want to do? I'm like, I don't know, but I'll do it. So they tell me you can't do writing alone as a discipline. It's not possible. You have to take other things. You have to take directing. You have to take visual effects. You have to take editing. You have to mix combinations because you can't just major in writing. And so there I was, a guy that was looking to write, just thrown into the space where I had to learn to make films now, so that's how it happened. It was a pure, I don't know if it was an accident, but it was like it was an interesting process where things just kind of fell into place. And in the 3 years I spent there, I just fell in love with the process of like making films and discovering new ways of telling stories. Now I went from photography, now I'm learning how to make motions, so it just kind of strangely all fell into place.
How did your family, how did they deal with this kind of journey or the struggle with kind of mental health? And I ask that just because around me also there are people that are quite close to me struggling with it, and it's always it's not a weird space. I mean, I find that I use the same words and they mean different things to me, but externally I use interesting a lot, and somebody will go, it's not that interesting, but I mean it in particular context. but it's a journey in itself, trying to figure out how to support someone going through a process that, like you said, there's no injection for it, right? It's a conversation, and it's trying to understand, and is trying to have empathy at a level that's beyond sometimes the most empathetic person, if that makes sense.
Correct. And it's also a cultural conversation, right? Because as much as my mom didn't fully understand it, she was still curious, but she was also like, what exactly is going on? Or something, like, did somebody, So it became that conversation again, like, who's loying my son? As opposed to sitting down with me and talking to me and be like, what's going on with you? And so that part of the conversation took years. It took years. But my sister, I have 4 older sisters, and so one of them was really open to having those conversations with me. And her twin was the one taking me to see therapists as well during the time. So I did have some support in that my sisters were open to at least hearing me out, understanding what is going on. Yeah, so my sisters were very open to helping me navigate that. So it made it easier for me to sort of, I suppose, ask questions, because I like to think of myself as a very philosophical guy, even at that young age, always been very interested in deep conversations and deep thoughts about life. So I was asking myself, what exactly is happening? Am I responsible for what's happening? Is there somebody out there, one lawyer for real, or what's going on? So it was just all the questions in the air. But my sisters were very supportive, and then my mom, in due time, thanks to my work, actually started asking questions, because she would look at the work and have a feeling, right? She'd have a feeling, but she didn't have the language to explain what the feeling was. And that's where I was able to come in and be like, that feeling right there, is the thing I was experiencing during that time. And so it built sort of like a bridge, like a bridge of empathy between me and her over time. So it's not like she wasn't being supportive during that time. She was just confused because her cultural background, her experiences in life did not afford her the luxury to know and understand what exactly it was that I was dealing with. And maybe we can get into this at a deeper level too, because Black and brown people don't have the language to sort of
Absolutely.
articulate mental health issues. And literally in our cultural indigenous language, we don't have such things. I think Afrikaans is the only language in South Africa that has that. And English. Sorry, I keep forgetting English. It's of course English. But I think of all the many indigenous languages we have here, we don't have access to that language. So how do you empathize with something you can't communicate or can't express? So yeah, it was very difficult for her at first, but over time, thank God she took the time to try and understand and hear me out. And she was incredibly supportive from that point out.
I mean, I do agree with you in terms of we don't have the language, but I think that connection to feeling and being open to that, because for me personally, despite kind of my background and my exposure and let's say the diversity of experience and diversity of context that I have, sometimes things don't make sense to me, right?
Yeah.
But I still know that because I love the person and I want them to be better, in inverted commas, I will try and support them and just try and be there, even if I don't get it.
Yes.
And I think sometimes and that's what your work does, and that's what your work did for your mother, is like you were saying, you could connect to that thing that when you look at it, what you feel, that's what I'm feeling. And it's like, I don't actually have to understand the intricacies of it to be able to love and support you and to be there for you.
Absolutely. That's the basis of empathy, right? That's the root and basis of empathy, in that just because you don't understand somebody's feelings doesn't mean you have to disconnect from them, right? You kind of just have to understand that, like, it's happening to them, and you're gonna be there with them because you love that person. You care for that person. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I couldn't have put it better.
And that's at the roots of our cultures, like across the continent.
Yes, absolutely.
That Ubuntu, Boto, whatever you want to call it, implies a humanity, and it implies an empathy and an understanding of we are, as opposed to just I am.
Absolutely. Also, I just realized that the way we pronounce Ubuntu is a very English way of Ubuntu. It's Ubuntu, right?
Well, I speak to
I'm so used to it now.
So Boto I can say.
Kibutu.
Yeah, Boto I can.
Exactly,
Boto I'm comfortable with. Ubuntu is.
Yes.
I mean, when I try to speak Zulu, already my accents are skewed and off. Just like a Xhosa person trying to speak Setswana or something.
Exactly. I understand. I think I have to thank you for actually saying it Kasesotho, because Orobotu, I realized Ubuntu. It's such a private school of saying Ubuntu. No disrespect to private schools.
Yeah, but I mean, when we talk about language, it is interesting. Again, there's that word, but it is interesting how we, as particularly the country has been evolving, and we catch onto ideas, and then they become these flags that we wave. It's like a cliche. A lot of people discard cliches, but if you take a step back and you actually just look at it, like, there's so much power and so much, so much wisdom in it. And because Ubuntu has become this kind of rallying cry to say, hey, look, this is why we are great, because we have this kind of inherent philosophy in our cultures. We lose sight of what it actually means, and how to actually manifest it, like essentially how to show up. So, I mean, like you're saying, like, that's empathy. It's like showing up because we are, like showing up because we're a community.
Correct.
I had a random, well, not a random, but I had a conversation the other day with a friend of mine, and I was talking about, for me, the different ways we communicate, say between kind of genders, so between men and women. So, growing up, you're always told, as a man, you don't communicate enough. You don't share enough. And
Right.
I wrote a column many years ago, and my whole thing was, we actually do. We just don't do it in the way that a woman may do it. But then we're being held to account on that criteria. And I'm like, when one of my closest friends' father passed away, I drove from Joburg to Lesotho. I was there every day. I was working. I was fetching chairs and cutlery and helped set up the tent. And that was my communicating my love for him. Within context of our relationship, because we're not prone to, hey man, I love you, I'm really sorry, but it's like, it's showing up and doing the work.
Yes, I guess I'm also curious to ask you, like knowing your friend the way that you do you think, like, had you done it differently, the way that the more conventional, more societally acceptable way of showing up and saying, hey, I'm sorry, and then, or sending a text and saying, I'm sorry for your loss, and just not showing up, do you think they would have reacted very differently to the way that you showed up for them?
I think it would have affected our relationship, because it's like, oh, and then when they just messages and is that it? Like, you do that for people but somebody that you're close with, like, you need to show up in some form. And if you're if you're not able to even show up in person, but there's a way of going about it.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I absolutely agree with you on, I think, the nuance of how differently people, like, how we communicate differently. Because I agree with you. There's a conversation I've been having with a friend of mine as well, in that, like, because we saw the same thing online. People say men don't speak about things, don't communicate, and we looked at each other and said, that's not true, man. We spend hours on phone calls or like in person communicating very differently. It's like they're holding us to a different standard. They're saying we don't communicate because we don't communicate the way they want us to communicate. And this, maybe if we stretch it even beyond gender binaries as well, I think it's even to personhood individually, right? In the same way when people say, for example, check in on your friends. Okay, great. That's great. So it's all good and well. We should check in on our friends. And I agree with that. We should. But I think it's also important to know how your friends want to be checked in on, because you don't want to bring sunflowers to somebody who's sad, whereas they actually think of sunflowers as bad luck. So now I show up with sunflowers and be like, hey man, I heard you're having a bad day. Here's the sunflowers to cheer you up. And they're like, wow, this person hates me because now they gave me sunflowers. Now they're having a worse day. So I think it's important for us to actually get to know how people want to receive affection and love and empathy and all these things, so that when we show up for them, we show up for them in a way that actually means something to them. In the same way that when we communicate with people, we should be able to communicate with them in a way that, we understand it will reach them, So there's also that, so that we remove our sort of like our ego from this process of showing up for people. It's not about us. It's really about the other person. So I think that's a lot of work to do in really showing up to people that I think a lot of us don't partake in, because it's easier to just show up and be like, hey, I did my part. I marked the register. Yeah. But Kojo went to Lesotho, showed up for his friend in a way that he understood would connect and be meaningful, So it's unspoken between the two of you in a way that, like, he'll be like, you know what, Kojo, in my time of deepest needs, you came, and showed up for me, and you put in the work in a way that I would have loved for you to show up, and that probably meant a lot more to them. Obviously I don't know your relationship with them, but it's like, I'd imagine it meant so much more to them in a way that's, as opposed to somebody just showing up randomly in a way that would not connect with them, and that's a lot of work that goes into this idea of Ubuntu. It's really understanding how other people want to be showed up for. And I see this in my mom as well. I see this in the older generations. They really understand this, because my mom will do the same thing. She will travel like hundreds of kilometers to like go to events or funerals or just gatherings to people she doesn't even like that much. She'll go, because she'll go because there's that, they understand that, like, we show up for each other in a way, and she knows that the way she's about to show up for those people is going to mean so much to them, and that's all that matters. It's about community, but there's also nuance in the way we show up. And that's, for me anyway, I feel that's very important, that we understand that. And especially in the space of mental health, you could make situations worse for somebody if you showed up in a way that might negatively affect them. Or you could really give them space sometimes if you understand that's what they need, That's also showing up in a way when you give people space if you know that in that moment they need space. So there's just a lot that goes into this idea of Ubuntu. And I think it's really what makes it Ubuntu. It's not just that you show up, but it's like you actually understand, like, that person's needs, that you show up for them in that way.
At what stage of the journey did abstract pieces come about?
Wow, abstract pieces, guys, that work. So abstract pieces wasn't initially abstract pieces, right? It was just a guy taking pictures in a bedroom, like every day, over like 2-3 years, basically. And I was going through it in that time. I was going through it, and I wasn't sure what exactly it was that I was going through. You know what I mean? I just knew that I was going through a lot psychologically, and I was isolating a lot, and I had picked up very bad habits during that time, and I wasn't sure why this is happening. My life has changed so quickly. But more poignantly, this was after UCT. This was definitely after UCT. So, I'm just taking pictures every day, and it's happening, and it's building, and it's building, and it's building. And after like 2 years, I have all these images that I've just been making, and I'm looking back at them and thinking to myself, gosh, man, what is going on with you? Like, this is beautiful. Don't get me wrong. Nice, beautiful. It's profound. But what's going on in your mind? Because I've never seen you do something like this before. I'm not a trained photographer. I'm not a trained editor. But somehow I'm able to do this thing to this level. It boggled my mind as well. And so, at that point, I started asking questions about these mind, body, spiritual connections, because there's definitely something happening here that I have never learned how to do, but I'm doing it to this level, and it's tapping into aspects of my personhood that I've never, ever been to. Even in conversation with my biggest confidant, which is my sister, we've never been to those depths. It's almost like I'm looking at myself for the first time, and it's confusing me. So yeah, I'll say after UCT, during film school, a little after film school as well. So yeah, around that time.
It feels like you're looking at yourself from the outside, but experiencing yourself all at the exact same time, and going through these changes and trying to make sense of it.
Yes. It's like being a ripple in the ocean, trying to understand the ocean, right? You just kind of like, it's happening and you feel the motion, but you're like, what exactly am I in the context of everything? I know I'm a part of something, because I can't just exist in the way that I'm existing, right? I'm a part of something, but I can't explain it. And yeah, it was really awkward. Because you also had people at times seeing your work, and they go like, yo, man, this is beautiful. Wow, man. Damn, this is beautiful. You're so dope. Hey, man, I wish I could be like... That time you're like, man, I'm going through it. I'm fighting for my life. In these pictures, And I don't know what exactly I'm looking at, but people are telling you, yo, man, you're dope. You should definitely take this to a gallery, man. You could be the next big thing. I'm like, man, I don't know what I have. I don't know what's going on here. Like, you're telling me I should go to the galleries and whatnot. I'm like, I'm trying to understand, man, because this looks like these images are trying to tell me something, because all the objects I'm placing in this, all the objects I'm placing in the frame, all mean something to me. These elements mean something. There's a lot of poetic license that goes into these images. Nothing, like, no part of the frame is wasted in my images. So it's like they're all telling me something. I'm seeing images in my dreams as well that I'm putting into these images. I'm trying to understand. I'm talking to my sister as well, asking for clarity because she's very spiritual, very deeply spiritual. So I'm asking for guidance. She's giving me, she's telling me this, she's telling me that, So it was very confusing at first. At first, it was very confusing because I was also in conflict with myself. That there's no way I'm feeling like this. There's no way I'm feeling this way, Because people forget that when people say abstract pieces on the internet, it says Black South Africa. A South African photographer destigmatizes mental illness in Black community.
Yeah.
They forget that I'm also Black. I come from the Black community. So those same sort of like holdups that other Black people might have about mental illnesses, I have too. So I'm looking at these images. They're telling me, listen, man, there's something definitely inside of you that's happening. You might want to have a conversation with someone about it. I'm like, no, it can't be happening to me. But there it is. So at first there was this push and pull where like I'm in conflict with myself. I'm also in conflict with the other self that's telling me, the psyche is telling me, listen, I'm your friend. I'm trying to help you. I'm not trying to fight against you. I'm just trying to help you. I'm the messenger. So there was also that conflict to resolve. So at first it was incredibly confusing, just incredibly confusing. And I wanted to stop. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to make images. I don't want to do this. I'd rather write poetry, go back to writing poems. That was easy. I can use big words and confuse myself. I don't need to see this every day, But that was it. And I think it was just about really leaning into it and understanding that this process is much bigger than me. It's not about, being right or wrong. It's not about being the best or the worst. It's really about being brave enough to fully understand yourself in the world and being open to whatever you find, so it's been a long and interesting journey with abstract pieces, I won't lie.
Because you started putting them out into the world. I'm assuming then you also then have to, in a way, compartmentalize, because there's your personal and internal journey and relationship with what you're seeing. But now it's going out into the world and you can't control how it's going to be reacted to. And the reactions can actually further influence positively and negatively your personal relationship and your personal journey.
Correct. There was actually a lot of interesting moments in that period. I mean, you say something very important there about like, not knowing how people are going to react and trying to control that, because in the beginning, I think the very first, one of the first exhibitions I had in Cape Town with this work, I wasn't even presenting it as a body of work that was dealing with psychological issues with mental illnesses or mental health or whatnot. It was just some nice, as they used to call it, surreal photography. It was just some nice, surreal photography. A guy is doing cool things. And I remember I was having this exhibition at this space in Cape Town called the Young Blood Beautiful Life Gallery. And how that exhibition came to be, very interesting as well, because when I was working as a copywriter, our offices were in that building, like right at the top. Our office was at the building. Before I knew what exactly galleries was, I was just in the space where people are coming to view art all the time. I didn't get it. And so when I really started getting into it, people were like, maybe you should start showing your work somewhere. I was like, oh, I work in a space that's a gallery and I get along with everyone. I should just ask if it's possible for me to showcase my work here. And fortunately for me, they looked at my work. They said, yes, please come showcase something in here with us. Would love to have you here. And so when I had that exhibition, it's happening during First Thursdays. Now, I'm not sure if you've experienced First Thursdays in Cape Town, but
I've heard about it.
Insane.
I've seen pictures. Looks like chaos.
Kojo. Please take an Uber. Don't go with your car because you won't find parking. Put on some comfortable shoes because there'll be walking. There'll be a lot of walking. So it gets super packed, especially in the summer. In the summer, it gets super packed. So, and this gallery is like right in the middle. So all these people are coming in and I'm just so shocked and confused because this place is packed with people and they're 3 floors. So there's so many people coming to see this work and I'm just overwhelmed, man. I'm standing like next to my work. I'm overwhelmed. I'm like, I need to go stand somewhere else because people are coming in here. They're asking questions and I'm just like, I wasn't ready for this. I don't know what to tell them. So towards the end of the night, this guy walks in, some Chinese guy. Well, Chinese, but like he grew up in South Africa. Like he wasn't traveling from China or anything. And so he walks in there. He kind of does this thing where people come in, they look at the work, they've got their arms at the back, they're drinking their wine, they're looking cool. And, he's just like investigating the work back and forth. And I'm sitting in the corner, just minding my own business, like not too close to the work, but like far enough, just nice distance. And during this time when he's doing this, he turns and we sort of turn at the same time and our eyes kind of meet. And he looks at me and I look at him and he starts walking towards me. And I'm thinking to myself, what's about to happen here? And so he comes up and he says, are you the artist? And nobody had asked me that the whole night. Because I had a way of just chilling around my work where people couldn't tell it was me. And he's like, are you the artist? And I was like, ish, yeah, I am. But please, I'm tired. Please don't ask me a lot of questions. No disrespect. It's been a long night. So many people. And he says, I don't want to ask you questions. I just want to thank you. So I'm confused. Like, what do you want to thank me for? I mean, what's going on? He says, I recognize the deep sadness and the deep struggle in your work that I'm looking at. And before I came here, I was actually on my way back home. I just had a horrible couple of months, generally a terrible life. And tonight was the night where I was actually contemplating ending it all. And so on my way to my car, I just stumbled upon this gallery and I came up here and I saw your work. And I just want to thank you because I feel seen. I feel like my experience has been seen. So you need to understand, I'm standing there as somebody who's not openly speaking about this. I didn't say this body of work was about that. I'm not openly telling anybody about that in my life. And here comes a man telling me that he sees it and he feels seen in that. So I go back home that night and I'm thinking to myself, gosh, like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? Like, why am I not being open about what I'm experiencing? Because I feel like we can actually connect with more people. Because I felt seen as well in that conversation. I was like, that was beautiful. I felt the most seen I'd ever, like, even like the entire night, 100 people came there. People were just like, yo, dope work. This is beautiful. This guy said, yo, this is terrible. I love it because I feel the same way, So yeah, it really changed my perspective in terms of like relinquishing that control, not just in the creative process, but in when you release it to the world and just let it go, just let it go. Like you've done your part.
Yeah.
It's done something for you. And now it's time to let it go. Literally, you have no control. People might say good or bad stuff, but like, let it go. Somebody might gravitate to their conversation and that like them finding meaning in that conversation might be more valuable, not just for you, but to the community as a whole. And yeah, that conversation really changed my life. It really did.
You are listening to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast, a podcast in which I chat to Africans from a cross-section of society and sectors, including art, culture, design, business, and creativity, to name a few. We delve into their journeys, the decisions they have taken to get to where they are, how they do what they do, and everything in between. Essentially, we go wherever the spirit takes us. Now let's get back into the conversation. You talked about being a copywriter. So the other day I was online kind of just searching for stuff. And I know that you had a relationship with poetry. But I found travel articles written by a Tsoku Maela. Is it the same person?
Correct, yeah. It's the same person.
just random travel articles. On a travel website.
Yes, Getaway, correct.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So has writing
I worked with Getaway. Yeah.
While you work, while you've embraced the more visual aspect of your talents and your kind of lens and your creative outlets, what role has writing played in that? And does it still play a role?
Okay, so I think in totality, right? Writing in totality, just as an art form and as an ability, plays such a huge role in everything I do, right? Because it's narrative and storytelling. And no matter how you cook it up, no matter how you mix it up, it's storytelling. There's elements to it that helps me structure everything. So I'm able to make the stuff that I make because I think that way. I know how to connect ideas that feel foreign to each other. But as a profession, I've always had this, because I know people are obsessed with this idea of being a full-time artist. I don't know what that is. I don't know what full-time anything is, to be honest. Because in my opinion, if you're doing something, you're full-timing it, right? Like you can't half and half the time that you're doing something. But there's this obsession with being a full-time artist and whatnot. And for me, it's always been different. For me, making art, the way that I make art, is a safe space for me, right? It's the only safe space I have in the world. It's the only place where I can put my head down and really look at it's my rage room, if you like. It's a place where I go and just like pour it all out, let my vulnerabilities out without sort of like any barriers, and then we move. I've always wanted to do that and work at the same time. I've always wanted to do that because I have other interests. So I've always wanted to write in the industry, in television. I've read in television. I've written articles as well. So I've always wanted to work while I'm making art. It's never been like I just want to do this thing full time because I'm always scared of my safe space becoming a means to an end, right? Where I'm putting so much tension into it and going like, now I need to survive by making art all the time, And I've been very fortunate to be able to make sort of like a very comfortable living with art, right? And that like my work is collectible in that sense, and I'm very lucky and I'm grateful for that. But I don't think it would have been the same if I was doing it all the time. I would have lost my mind, honestly, knowing that like if I don't sell this week, the rent is not paid. That would have not worked for me. I would have felt like now my safe space is a means to an end, and I'd have nowhere else to go to vent, for me to articulate my thoughts and feelings about the times. So for me, it was always clear. I want to work, and I also want to come back and make art because those experiences in life and in work always inform, how I sort of articulate myself in that creative space.
You've just described why I eventually ran away from poetry.
Really?
And call myself a retired poet, which seems to offend people.
Cool. I'm offended.
You'll be strong, Papa. You'll get over it. Don't worry. But so at some stage, I decided, and I mean, this is like what, early 2000s? So I probably wasn't thinking straight either. But I decided that I was going to give this thing a crack and make poetry my career. And I've done countless different things. I was doing, like, I had an IT company. I worked for a furniture company. So like I had different, sectors I was working in, but poetry was always my safe space, my release, my therapy, as the cliche goes, right through school into my 20s. And then I decide, not long after I get married, that I'm going to try and, make a thing of this poetry. And what basically just happened was I started becoming more and more bitter about it, because you can't build a family. I mean, even today, with all the doors open, you can't build a life and a family just by being a poet. And eventually I was just like, okay, this thing is not working. And then I went and worked. And since then, I mean, it's been over a decade. Like, I used to write 2-3 poems a day. I mean, most of them were crap, but I wrote every day. Like, I had the muscle was well tuned. And I had a practice. And I lost all of that. And even today, to sit down and write is hard work. So, I mean, you've just described, when you're describing it and you're describing what you didn't want to lose, I think I'm the case study for you made the right decision.
But I guess I have a question for you as well. My sisters have been fans. Like they know of your work. I mean, the first time I came to your radio show, actually, my sister was like, "Yo, Kojo, you're going to Kojo's thing." I was like, "Hey, you better not mess up." So I was like, "Hey, it's too much pressure." So I mean, your work has clearly had an impact on people, right? In the authenticity that you move in your work. So I'm curious to know, like, if in you sort of like feeling like you've lost that space, is it a space? One, have you sort of like did you have to go through a mourning period for that space that you once had? So like the unlived life, let's call it that. Or two, do you feel like it's something you'd want to get back into, even just for yourself, to go back to doing something that you really enjoyed at a different point in your life?
I don't know that I had. I don't know that I had a mourning period. As to going back, for the last, I mean, it's been more than a decade. So let's say for the last kind of 8-9 years, it's been a fluctuation where today I wake up and I'm like, yeah, like actually, I want to get back into that space as a form of kind of release and to reconnect with it in a different way. And then tomorrow I wake up and I feel like that. And then day after tomorrow I wake up and I'm just like, yeah, nah, I'm good.
Right.
I have started a poetry book every year for the last 10 years. And last year I literally put probably 15 years worth of poems into one document and went, do you know what? I'm going to edit these things and I'm going to publish them myself. I'll pay for it just because. And then 2 weeks ago, I was having a conversation with a friend and I realized I haven't looked at that document since December. And and then I've started with, I should look at the document. So it's, I think I'm at the stage where I do yearn for that space, yearn for what it, kind of what it fulfilled in my life. Because I have hobbies because I'm a big believer in this thing of hobbies and not monetizing hobbies, but that's become a thing now. I don't have enough time because I have like 3-4 hobbies. Now I don't have enough time for those. So yeah, I think for the last 2-3 years, I've been kind of in this space of trying to figure out how to fit or bring those things back in. And kind of every year it feels a bit more urgent.
Right. Because time, you feel like time.
Yeah, I mean, it's time. I try not to overthink the time thing.
Right.
I'm on the verge of, but when this comes out, it'll have happened already, but I'm the verge of turning 53. I'm grateful for having made it this far because there's so many that, especially in the last couple of years, like there's so many friends and family that haven't made it or didn't even make it this stage. I think it's more just, life is meant to be lived. And if there's certain things that are going to bring some element of fulfillment or satisfaction or simply joy, then I should be able to do them. And
Absolutely.
There is a part of me that I have kind of shoved to the side. Let's say there's that creative part of me that I've shoved to the side for a very long period of time. And, in those moments of self-reflection, it's just kind of like, actually, you need that.
Yeah. I hear that 100%. I hear that 100%. And yeah, it's very inspiring to hear you think about it the way you think about it. Obviously, like as somebody being old as well, that's done, I think, so much more. You've written a book as well, the podcast is named aptly after that as well. So you're still in a way connected to your writing. It's like, and I think for me, it's very inspiring to hear you speak about your journey the way you're speaking about it. And those fluctuations you had with the poetry as well. When you spoke about that, I was like, yo, I hear that. I was like, why do we writers do this? Why do we do this? We all have those babies. We're like, yeah, I'm going to come back to you. And then 10 years later, like, damn, I need to come back to you again. So I hear, but the beautiful thing about writing is that it ages very beautifully over time, right? It's the words just get richer with age. Now, the more you understand life, the more I think, maybe it might be different for you, but like the more you look at your previous writings, you're like, man, that guy, he might have understood some things, but now I understand more. There's more around this situation, or like even some of the deepest things you thought you ever wrote, you're like, yo, this guy did not know anything at all.
I'm more there. I'm more there. But at the same time, I mean, so I journal regularly, but one thing I haven't done is kind of looked over my journals. I kind of like finish it and then I put it on the shelf. I do my morning pages generally every day.
Right.
But there was a time when I'd look back over that, or especially when I used to do poetry. And I can actually go back and look at certain poems and tell you where I was emotionally, spiritually, mentally. And in doing that, you also kind of see, do you know what, like I have grown, like I have evolved as a person, which is also kind of the positive part of it.
Absolutely. Beautiful.
In terms of your work now, I mean, well, let's say your art, how do you approach it a lot more deliberately, or are you just kind of like you did with those, that first kind of main body of work that in essence propelled you into the world in a very different way from the way you were showing up in the world? How do you approach it now? Like, do you have a subject matter? Are you thinking about something and you go, okay, I'm going to do some, I'm going to create around this, or, how do you approach it now?
Yeah. So Abstract Pieces was probably the only body of work where I felt afraid to show up deliberately. After that, I was pretty much done with that. I was like, I knew where my power was as a storyteller, and I felt if I didn't move with authenticity and being deliberate, then I'm kind of breaking the promise that I made to myself in that hospital when I said, let's go tell stories in one frame, right? So now it's like, okay, cool. Now you can go show that you really know how to see things, how deep you can see things, how well you can connect ideas in a frame. So now every time I make a body of work, that's what I do. Most of the work that people don't see, the 98% of it, is happening on a page. It's happening in life and experiences. I don't have a lot of behind the scenes, because my behind the scenes is I'm living. That's my behind the scenes. Only God has access to that. So when I show up to shoot, people are surprised how quickly I shoot as well. They're like, man, how are you already done? Like, we spend more time setting up than shooting. I was like, because I've been in it. I've read, I've written, I've wrestled with my demons and God in the nights at 3 a.m. Now I'm here, I'm clear. I'm in flow. I'm in my flow state, and I know exactly what I'm trying to do or say, but there's also still room to collaborate with other force and energy where you have to improvise. I'm a big fan of Miles Davis, right? So it's like, and jazz, and most people who have improvised in some of their best works. Anyway, let me say that. I'm open to creativity and intuition in the moment. And I think some of my best works come in those moments where I go above the level of being prepared to just being tapped into that intuition, right? And I think you have to be prepared to tap into that energy. Otherwise, it's going to be very confusing. So now I'm a little bit more methodical, a little bit more measured, not measured, but like more calculated in terms of like, I know what I'm trying to say. So when you look at any image on my website, anywhere you find it, there isn't a single object in my frame. There isn't a single gesture. There isn't a single outfit. There isn't a single anything that isn't there for a reason. Everything is there to tell the entire story from beginning to end.
I also find that when you've created that foundation, that plan, it actually, as long as you're open, it actually puts you in a better position to be able to tap into whatever is coming in that moment. And being able to recognize that, okay, this is something different that's going to come and enhance or complement or just give a different eye to the experience. Whereas when you're not, when you haven't planned anything, then everything looks like a possibility.
Yeah, and so you're just throwing stuff at the wall and hoping it sticks, right? And then it sticks, and somebody, and I guess that's the slippery slope with art, in that you can get away with that sometimes. You can just throw stuff at the wall and it sticks, and then you frame it and you put it into a gallery or you put it on a website, and somebody goes, oh, it's so subjective. Like they have their own subjective reaction to it. And then you as an artist always have the license to say, I don't have to explain my art because it's all subjective. I don't have to do that. And then somebody comes along and goes like, oh my God, it's speaking to me in this way. Like, thank you, sister. I'm glad it speaks to you that way. And then you're done. You go home. You're an artist. You've done your job. You're done. Yeah. But for me, that's not enough. It's not enough. I'm always open to people having different interpretations, as they always will do. We have so many different interpretations. But for me, right, when I was making the work, because I'm talking about me, my experience in the world, like I said, it goes back to autoethnography. It's my experience in the world. And, if it connects to somebody and it hits the same way, I'll be like, oh man, they got it too. Great. We are in the same group. We're in the same WhatsApp group, but there'll always be outliers, right? But you have to be prepared in some capacity. I recently, I've worked with a few artists, in the last couple of years, and I adore all of them, but we all work very differently. And I've met many of them who do that, where they'll just be like, man, let's just go with the flow. Let's just go with the flow. And I'm like, I don't know if I can just go with the flow, because I don't know what the flow is. I don't know what the flow is. Where are we going? So I think for me, it shows a level of self-understanding to be able to be prepared somehow in your creative space, because it shows that you've done some work within yourself and you're open to it. And this is not to say people who do improv and whatever are not amazing, because I do think there is a level of preparedness in improv as well. It might not be happening in the moment, but over a lifetime, it might have been happening. Do you know what I mean? So there's that level of understanding as well. So yeah, I'm a big fan of, really understanding self and trying to understand self in the world and showing up in my space, understanding where we're going. Also, because I'm working with other people sometimes, I have to respect their time. And, I don't want to be like, hey guys, we're just figuring it out. So let's be here for 7 hours together just trying to figure it out. It's like, no one's trying to do that. My practice has evolved to where I'm not just doing self-portraits anymore. I get to work with other people, and I have to value their expertise and their time, so that I bring them on board knowing that they're going to add value to that story that we're trying to tell.
I think it's the slight difference or the balance between pure expression and telling a story or sharing a particular viewpoint. And there are those who are able to and enjoy just being able to express in that moment and taking whatever's in that moment and kind of letting it out. And then kind of with hindsight, you kind of go, oh, these are how we connect the dots. As opposed to, like you're saying, I have a particular viewpoint, I have a particular lived experience that I'm looking to share here. If it resonates, great. If it doesn't, that's also cool. But I'm going to go in with the intention of sharing my viewpoint or my story in this moment, which also feels very much like I guess because I write, it's like a writer's approach. Like when I start to write something, it's kind of, what do I want to communicate? So I need to know that before I start. Otherwise, it's just like the pages of my journal, like mumbo jumbo, because you're going everywhere.
Yeah. I'd also go a step further as well. I think communicate is important, but also I like the way that you use intent, like intention. Like sometimes when you set an intention, you're not really fully sure. You're not always sure, right? But sometimes going into a space not with the intent to communicate, but the intent to navigate is also as powerful, because you're not 100% sure what you're trying to say or but you've got a feeling, and your intent is to I'm gonna go navigate that feeling, and you go in there. That's also being prepared in a way. People don't see it that way sometimes, but that's also being prepared, because you're going to the space with the intent. You're not just going there like, okay, I've got a camera, I've got a canvas, I'm just gonna do whatever. And you can do that if you want to. If people are listening, we're not saying if you're doing that it's a bad thing. I mean, we all have different approaches, right? Don't DM me saying you said. But it's just I guess for me, it's setting an intent, okay, cool. I'll give you an example with Broken Things. When we did Broken Things after Abstract Pieces, right? Broken Things, when I put it out, it was a story of self-love. So my intention when I went into that work was to navigate that. Was to navigate the idea of self-love through these two characters who fall in love with their own imperfections, and then it strengthens their love to each other, and that self-love kind of helps each other love each other. Cool, that was my intent. But over time, after releasing the work, when I started learning about masculinity, when I started learning about Black identities, when I started learning about how we love ourselves as Black men, that narrative in my head changed, right? Because now I realized that like all the things that I was putting in there psychologically, deep in my psyche, I was putting elements in the frame that were actually dealing with more masculine identities and what self-love means when you don't know what a self is, number one, right? As opposed to just this self-love in just like this romantic type way. It's just like a more of a political statement. So it's like my intent was to navigate that, and I thought I understood it when I finished the work. But I didn't fully understand it until like a year or two later, where I started like understanding like, wait a minute, now I'm catching up to the work. I'm catching up to what I was doing, because your psyche just, I don't know how it works, man. It's far ahead of you in a way, in the same way that the way you collect information in the world, when you walk around, your peripheral eye view, your sound, like your hearing, you're always collecting data, but you're not always aware of the data when you're thinking about it consciously. So you're able to store so much more information in your mind and your body in a way that you'll never be able to articulate in a time. So the work is literally ahead of me in that sense. And I thought I understood, but I went in there with the intent to navigate the idea of self-love. And so there's always room for that, for that evolution, when you set that intention purely in the beginning. And, you know, I'm open to learning how to just kind of go into a space and just kind of just throw paint at a wall and then, you know, figure it out later. But right now, this is the way I know how to make sense of things best.
So what's occupying your time now? Today?
Right now,
what are you excited about? What are you working on? What are you exploring?
I'm working on myself, guys. Whenever people ask me what I'm working on myself. I'm my biggest project. But to be honest with you, I'm in a space right now because the last couple of years, I've been at sort of odds with my camera and my creative process, right? I'm always thinking about images. I'm always thinking of stories. I'm always connecting the dots. I'm always writing, right? But I haven't been in a space where I wanted to move and to make things. I'm in a space where I'm just reflecting, because I think a lot has happened in the world over the last 4 or 5 years. I think a lot is happening right now. So I'm in a space where I'm trying to locate my sense of empathy again with the work that I'm doing. Because I've also gone through spaces where I've been in gallery spaces. I've been in places where I've showcased in a lot of wonderful art fairs in many different places. So like, I've also, as a young artist at some point, fell into the trap where my mind was starting to feel like important. I was starting to feel important to myself in the work I'm doing, right? You're like, oh man, look at me. I'm the guy at Art Basel. Hey, I'm doing amazing. Who can stop me now? But like you know what I mean? Like your mind slowly, even if you know better, it's like things change. Even the way that you approach your practice, you know, you're thinking about the audience. And the way I think about the audience in that sense is like, I'm always on the stage and there's this like light coming from the top and you can't see them, but you can hear them. Like it's completely dark. You can't see them, you can hear them. So you start playing more to the audience in every room that you're in. Anything you write, anything you conceptualize, you're always thinking about the audience, because now you've had that feedback constantly in different places, you know, and sometimes from people that don't actually like come from the core space that you're trying to connect with, right? So over the years, I've been trying to take it slow and reconnect with sort of like the energy, not necessarily the energy that got me into the space initially, because I don't think that could happen. I'm at a different place in my life and a different space in my soul as well. I'm trying to rediscover what really moves me now in terms of making. So if you look at like the previous body of work that I made, which I released earlier this year, it's more of a digital rendition as opposed to photography, right? I'm looking at us or myself in inhabiting space, whether it's digitally or in the real world. I'm trying to find myself as a pixel on the screen type thing, you know? So like, those are just reflections that I probably in the past would have never put out, because I've been like, yo, it's too abstract. People will never understand, you know? But now I'm like at a place where I understand that like, it's not about that anymore. It's about really going back to having those conversations with yourself, and you don't have to share everything that you're doing. You know, you can just do it for yourself, and you can just keep on writing. You can keep on journaling. You can go back to being an artist. And it took me a while to really wear that mantle of being an artist, because I feel like it's a really loaded, a heavy mantle to wear. So you can go back to being an artist again. You can go back to reconnecting with your feelings, because feeling is very important. A lot of us are in a state of capitalistic nihilism right now. We're in a state of apathy right now. It's like, it's cool not to care. because it's safer. It protects us from being authentic and like being hurt. And I've also had to be honest with myself and say over the last couple of years that has changed. Like my enthusiasm and optimism and my radical way of thinking has also been warped by the events that have happened in the world. I've become a little bit jaded. I've become a little older, and I felt a little hopeless at times. But instead of moving with the same energy that I had previously, I've kind of slowed down. So that's affected the way I've kind of approached my creativity as well, because you can't separate the two. For me, anyway, my safe space doesn't feel safe anymore. I've commodified it. So how do I really call the boats back home and reconnect with myself? So I've really just taken my time very slowly to reconnect with the space, number one. And I've just finished a residency project with a UK based artist. We actually did a sharing last week with a wider audience, and that's been happening for 2 years. So that's been a really cool space for me to kind of like rekindle that energy as well. And generally, I'm always continuing my work with mental health, man. We did an incredible show in India with a group of curators and some community leaders there, where we are bringing the conversation to the public. And we're finding that a lot of people, like I've been getting emails and we've been doing calls as well, people like really connecting with those conversations about masculinity and mental health. And you'd be surprised how many similarities we have with Indian people and South African black males. Like there's a lot of patriarchal ideals there that are quite similar. So the way we approach mental health issues is quite similar. So I mean, I always continue to work with schools and unis. I've been very fortunate to have a lot of people in academia write on the work as well. I get emails from students every day from like overseas. Excuse me, I came across your work online and we're working on it in class. Can you help me with this essay question? I'm like, where do you go first? Like before I give you the answers, where do you go? So I mean, right now I guess I'm also just sitting back, enjoying, reflecting, and also like seeing how the work has had impact in other people's lives, and just like reflecting on that too. What that means, and how we can continue to strengthen the connection between the arts and so like the real world and how we problem solve. It's not gonna live and die on a paper, on a wall. For me, it's always been about how do we actually enact change in the real world with this work that we're doing. So I guess the long version of that was that. The short version is I'm just chilling and reflecting and working very slowly to reconnect. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
Thank you, my man. I could ask you 101 other questions, but I think you've given us quite a bit to ponder. But I think the important component of it, which is something that I believe in, is that it's like the working in oneself. And I mean it's interesting because I've had a couple of episodes with men. And this is something that's starting to crop up a lot. The recognition that the only way we're going to kind of be better, like mentally, and be better in ourselves, is by actually putting in that work and finding 100%. Ways and outlets for, I guess, releasing the pressure valve to a certain extent.
100%. Yeah, maybe on that, if you don't mind, if I could just add a little something, because I think there's a broader conversation to be had, especially in a South African context in when we talk about mental health for males and also the state of gender-based violence in our country, right? For me, a couple of years ago, I applied to do my medical anthropology master's at SOAS, and this was going to be in the UK. This was literally going to be a master's dissertation. And what I was doing before then was doing sort of like ethnographic research, where essentially I was doing interviews with young black men in the township, in Limpopo, literally where I grew up. I went back and I was just interviewing guys, different ages, young, young boys, young adults, and older guys, trying to understand their relationship. Number one, it was just understanding the effects of social mobility in the township and how that affects them, number one. And also, two, state of mental health, what their understandings was around it. And number three, their relationship with violence, right? And I think what I found was quite staggering, so much that I was making a short film during that time about it. And I just, it was just mind blowing how many young black men in the context I was interviewing, one, didn't recognize that they had mental health issues. Number two, didn't realize how angry they were about a lot of things, because opportunities aren't coming up, businesses aren't happening, and so they channel that aggression towards anything they consider to be feminine. So women, dare I say, even homosexuals, or people who identify as homosexual or queer, even nature, it seemed to be like quite soft and feminine, to some extent, even kids. So the conversation around gender-based violence in our country, I think, is just missing some very key points and very key variables. In that we are not the only country in the world where you see gender-based violence being this high and social mobility being so low as well. Like there's a very intricate connection between these two things. And I often find that when we do have conversation around gender-based violence, a lot of spaces tend to exclude males. They try to exclude men. So because they go like, okay, men are the problem, so let's exclude them. But it's like, no, you should be including men. You should be talking to men, or you should be creating spaces for men to be having these conversations, not just about, I think, above everything about gender-based violence, but also about like what's happening under the hood, because that creates like all this malfunction in our spaces, how things happen, and how the violence erupts towards women in this country. I have a friend from the UK, and she was telling me a crazy story about how gender-based violence peaks a lot in her country during weekends because football.
Yeah.
So Arsenal loses a game, her husband loses his mind, hits on the woman.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. I mean, I like football. I'm a Manchester United fan. I should be losing my mind right now, But to me, it's not that deep, But like, this is the reality of things. It's the reality. It doesn't take that much. Alcohol abuse, drug abuse, also play a huge role. I mean, that's just gender-based violence. We also have to talk about male suicide rates in this country.
Yeah,
extremely high. I just lost a friend, Ebenezer. We buried him he was buried last Friday. So we lost a brother that we knew very intimately, and this is a brother who was very open about his struggles. And I remember one time he was workshopping, because he was a comedian as well. So he was workshopping a joke with me before he did it, and he said, South Africans have this way of glossing over issues, especially male issues. And he would say, if I meet a friend and they ask me how I'm doing, I'll tell them how I'm doing, right? And then after 30 minutes of telling them how I'm doing, they'll be like, otherwise, and then they'll just move on, type thing. And this was a joke he would workshop, and it would work every single time. But I recognized the sadness in that joke, because he was absolutely right. It's absolutely right. We don't hold space for, I think, males when it comes to issues of mental health in this country, because number one, we don't have the understanding and the language for it. We don't have the language to really fully understand. When somebody says depression to a guy in a township, what does that mean to them?
Yeah.
What does it actually mean? It probably means a negative thing, like it's my fault, I'm not good enough type thing, because there is no word for depression. I don't know, but there's definitely no word for mental health issues. And this was really the basis of my work in the last couple of years, was trying to bridge that gap between using visuals as a visual language to help us sort of like have these conversations, so that guys and women or whatever, we in Africa are able to have these conversations in a way that it's not always spoken. We can always show and try to build some empathy and maybe find solutions towards these problems. Because right now we're losing way too many young men to suicide.
Yeah.
In a way that like our leaders are not wrapping their head around, because they also come from the same systems that sort of like don't understand the issues, So yeah, I mean, we could talk about this for even longer, because it's definitely part of my research right now. But yeah, I thought I'll just touch on that in terms of like the interconnectedness of mental health issues to everything that's happening.
Yeah.
Seriously in this country, because mental health is an everyday thing. It's not just you take a pause, And for young men, we are in a very, very desperate state right now, especially with the economy looking this bad. So it's I fear for the worst when it comes to GBV and other things, but I also remain hopeful that we can find solutions moving forward.
Thank you very much, man. It was awesome chatting to you.
All right, thank you so much for having me, man. It's been a pleasure, and I'm glad we're able to finally do a sit down.
Yeah, and let's not leave it as long as we did it last time. Between that last time and this time, for next time.
For sure. For sure. Hopefully next time I'll join you in studio, man, and maybe we'll get better camera angles of me as well. So
Thank you for listening to this conversation. Please leave a review and subscribe. Check out the show notes for links to the guest, the podcast, and myself. I hope you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed having it.